Hi, my name is Dan Schmitt, and this is Team Chicago Challenge. We're at Daytona. We're with AHRMA, American Historic Racing Motorcycles Association. Today we're going to look at some more of the road race action, and we're going to be talking to some of the riders, some of the bikes. They'll be telling me about their bikes, and I'll tell you, there's a collection of bikes. This is pretty historic stuff. So let's go check out some of the racing action with AHRMA down here in Daytona Beach.
First race, 750 Formula. Ooh, oh no, rider down. As the bikes come through the first corner, looks like one bike went down. Another bike went over that rider. Let's look at it again as they come into the first corner. Bike goes down. That's Yvonne DeHamel on that Team Absolute BSA flipping. Could have been Chris Marshall that went down, or, oh no. Chris Marshall or Jim Stuck went down. Yvonne DeHamel went over the down rider. And that BSA, Rocket 3, red flag. We're going to have a complete restart. And the restart. Jumping up front. Number 9, Gary Nixon. He's riding at 750, single cam, M3 Honda. This is a replica of the Honda that Dickman won, the 200-miler at Daytona in 1970. Heels, it looks like Dave Rosno also on a 750 Honda, Super Dave Rosno. Gary Nixon got many, many laps around Daytona. Leads two 750 Hondas up front. They head out of second Horseshoe onto the banking. The West Banking, this is the 4-cylinder Honda Sing. Dave Rosno's got more horsepower. He dips down below Gary Nixon. Tim Joyce on that Harley Davidson. Rosno's up front down the back chute. Gary Nixon makes the move into the chicane. Then later on the brakes, they come out of the chicane to the east banking. Dave Rosno looks like he's got more power. Coming into the first corner, Dave Rosno, Gary Nixon. Heading to the International Horseshoe. On that Harley Davidson, it's like Tim Joyce on that 72 XR 750. Gary Fisher's on the move. You see this battle for the lead. Gary Cottonell on the Norton. Ken Yamamoto on that Moto Guzzi's on the Charge. Gene Baslin. You see Gary Nixon later on the brakes. Does he have the horsepower to chase down Super Dave? Dave Rosno, he gets into the draft. Off the banking. That beautiful Harley Davidson, that's Tim Joyce, and that 72 XR 750. Right with him is Gary Fisher. Gary Cottonell and Norton. The next time by, still up front, Dave Rosno. 750 Honda, single cam. There's that Harley Davidson of Tim Joyce. Chasing after Gary Fisher, also on a 750 Honda. There's battle up front. Nixon's on the Charge. Tries the outside line. Nixon's on the charge, late on the brakes. Makes the move. Back into the lead. Nixon's up front. Rosno second. They head up in the banking. He's got the horsepower out of the banking down the back chute. It's Gary Fisher on a Honda. Tim Joyce on the Harley Davidson XR 750. Ken Nimoto and he had 71. Moto Guzzi battling with Gary Cottontrell on the Norton. They come through the infield one more time. Super Dave Rosno's got the horsepower edge on Gary Nixon. He keeps getting them back little by little. He's stretching that lead. Gary Fisher also on a Honda running third. Tim Joyce running fourth. Gary Cottontail running fifth. Ken Nimoto sixth. Gene Baslin seventh. Mike Mellon eighth. Craig Echoes ninth. Norman Punski on the BSA is running 10th. And on this day, it's like Dave Rosno has got the horsepower on Gary Nixon. We should point out Gary Nixon is probably the only racer out there who did race on the beach. Before they built the Speedway, they ran on the beach, and I had a chance to run down to the beach and check it out. So let's look at the beach and some footage from 1952. 50 years ago, this is where the racetrack was. It's we're in Ponce Inlet, 11 miles south of the pier. The scene of motorcycle racing when they ran on the beach. This would be the south corner coming off the dune. And 2 miles up the beach. Looking at the Atlantic Ocean. Back in 1952, 50 years ago, riders, crew, getting ready for the 200-mile race. And as we look up A1A, 50 years ago, this was the racetrack as they headed south down A1A. And now looking down towards the south turn. The bike's coming down A1A, slowing down. Make that turn onto the beach. Now we look down the beach from the north turn. Bike's racing up the beach. Race north on the beach, south on A1A, as we see the bikes flash by. Number 2 went by, that's Dick Clanford on the Norton. Went on to win this event, and in the north turn, where they turned back through the dune, the north turn of this 4-mile track, 2 miles down, 2 miles back up, turning off the hard-packed sand, and make their way through the dune. And the one thing left is North Turn Beach Bar and Grill, Racing's North Turn. This is the original ticket window where they sold tickets for the grandstands and where the riders signed up. Inside, they got some beautiful artwork because they also ran cars and bikes on the beach. There's some pictures from the racing. bike's in the north turn.
Now let's jump back to 1967, the AMA 200-mile championship race, Daytona International Raceway. Up front, we got a battle going on. Gary Nixon, Buddy Elmore, Freddie Nix right there with the Harley Davidson. Dick Hammer, number 16, trying to work his way up front. Now we got a battle, a two-way battle between the two Triumph riders. Gary Nixon, number 9, Dick Hammer, number 16, as they go through the East Horseshoe, heading over to the Kink 200-mile race, March of 1967. On the back chute, Gary Nixon's up front. They're going to come in for a pit stop, and that is going to be the downfall for Dick Hammer. Rag got in his carburetor. It is Gary Nixon up front on the Triumph. It is Gary Nixon taking the win. Second place went to Buddy Elmore. Third place went to George Roeder on the Harley Davidson.
We're going to talk to one of the legends of motorcycle racing at Daytona Beach. Let's go to that right now.
My name is Bob Hanson, and in 1966 when I worked for Honda, Mr. Honda and I got along pretty good because he was basically a racer. I went to work for Honda in 1960, and he recognized me as a racer, and I recognized him as the same. And he called me up. I was running the racing parts warehouse as well as that region. And they called me from R&D and asked me if I would consider running 450 Hondas at Daytona. I already had my team of G50s entered and riders on them. And of course, as a good employee, and besides I thought it'd be a fun thing to do, I got the fellas to change, well, I changed the entries from G50 to Honda. No one had ever seen a 450 Honda. Well, it was a brand new motorcycle. And they built me these. In fact, the matter is I sent him color chips and so forth, so then they painted them. They knew what I was up to because I was running G50s for years. And the fact of the matter is, when I visited Japan, the R&D, and one of the engineers came running to me and he said, "Oh, your G50 finished first privateer in Canadian Grand Prix." And I thought, oh, and I didn't know it myself. But anyhow, he thought it'd be neat to run some 450s, and I thought it would be too. So I brought 3 450s down here that some people said I built them in the basement, and I didn't say I didn't, and I didn't say I did, because it was a private thing at that time. And we didn't run them anymore. They ran very well, and they decided, I worked for Honda, and they decided they didn't want to run them anymore, and I was really disappointed. So then we decided a few years ago that we'd build a clone. I do have one of the originals, but it's gotten to be too valuable to run. And then I built. Well, Terry came up to me, Terry Naughton came up to me and said, "I'd like to start up Team Hanson again." And I says, "God, that's 30 years ago." "Oh," he said, "I thought that would be nice." And I said, "Sounds like a good idea." So we built these as more or less clones of the original, which is resting now in my home. So it was a challenge. It still is. We've got a long way to go. The bikes were originally designed and built in 1966. And I think that they are probably the most actually vintage bikes that are here, because they're basically the same as they were in 1966. And they were pretty well ahead of in engineering at that time, but 30-year-old engineering is way behind now. But we're having fun and we're learning, and I wish Mr. Honda was still alive because I know he'd think it'd be great as well.
Next up, Premier 500, number 57 on that 450 Honda. It's Steve Brown making his way through the field. It's the same bike, or replica of the bike that ran here in 1967, which is also the year that Gary Nixon won the 200-miler on a Triumph. But charging through the field in that 450 Honda, that's Steve Brown. Another one of them Hondas. Number 118 is Scott Stickler. But up front, Pat Mooney, and he had 62 Norton Max, overhead cam. Right with him, that's Joseph Brenner, and he had 62 BSA Gold Star. Third place is David Roper, and the 59 Matchless. Jay Richardson running fourth. Also on the Norton, number 13, battling with Dave Roper there, fifth place. Larry Poons on to Seeley, moving up to sixth. That's Steve Brown. He had 67, 450 Honda. Making it out to the banking.
Capturing the win in the 500 Premier class, it was Pat Mooney. Second place went to Joseph Brenner. Now let's jump back to 1998. I borrowed a Ducati 750 for one of my students, and I had the opportunity to ride practice at Daytona.
So we come through turn one and head into the East Horseshoe. I hear another three-cylinder behind me, another three-cylinder BSA, and it's Yvonne DeHamel. Now here's a man that's had many races out here at Daytona. He might have won it a few times back when he was a Kawasaki rider and running them three-cylinder Kawasaki two-strokes. Yvonne DeHamel, whose son, Miguel DeHamel, has won out here on the Honda. So let's see if we can keep up with this three-cylinder and get an idea of what Daytona looks like. We come out of the West Horseshoe and head into the banking. Gets a good drive. So I get up in the banking, see if I can catch him. By Larry Poon. Now this three-cylinder, it seems like I can keep up with him. It's pretty neat being behind a former AMA road racing champ, this Canadian rider, and his British three-cylinder BSA, probably in 1971, 72.
Now we drop down into the backstretch chicane that will slow us down.
Coming to the East banking. And this Ducati's pulling right with him. So we head into the tri-oval. This is pretty neat being able to follow behind a former national champion, world famous Yvonne DeHamel. As we go through turn one, and we head into the East Horseshoe.
That is Daytona International Raceway. Now let's go talk to John Bassor, who's a builder of an inexpensive road race bike and get to talk to my old friend, Joe Lockney from Michigan.
My name is John Basor, and what we're filming here today is a kit bike that I put together out of the old AHRMA Harley-Davidson Sprint. Basically, the bike is built out of available used street parts and my kit. So the kit gives you all the fiberglass, the foot sets, the hand sets, the pipe, just basically everything that you can't rob off of an existing road-going model. We turnkey the bikes for $5,000 and we sell the kits for $24.95. We've campaigned it 2 years now, have never had less than a 7th place finish, and now we're starting on options like gearbox options and piston options and cam options, so on and so forth. And hopefully another year campaigning, we'll start pushing them up to the front. But basically the whole idea is to get people off the fence, and I tell everybody the same thing. For $24.95, if you don't get off the fence, rat, you ain't ever going to get off the fence.
My name is Joe Lockney, and I've been racing this bike for about 20 years. And the gentleman that's standing next to me is Dwayne McDaniels, who is the original rider and much more successful with this bike than I was. This bike qualified 3rd at Daytona here in 1969, and it's still running and still doing okay. Even competitive with some more of the updated motorcycles that we see on the track here. It's basically a standard production bike, which Yamaha used and updated the cylinders and heads and improved on the crankshaft bearings and things like that to make it a real racing motorcycle. But this is the predecessor to any of the super bikes that you really see today, especially from the Japanese. Even though it's two-cycle, it was the first concept of making racing motorcycles out of standard production motorcycles.
This was a Yamaha TD1C. It was based on a production model, but it's a factory racer. I got it from the Yamaha distributor. At that time I raced for the Yamaha distributor for Canada, Fred Daly Limited. It was brand new out of the box. I qualified 3rd here at Daytona at 149 miles an hour back in 1969, I think. It was a very fast scooter. At that time, everything on the track here, 90% of the bikes in that class were this bike, 250 Yamaha. They were very fast, air-cooled. Now they're all water-cooled, but they're not a whole lot faster than they were then. But the tires are tremendously better now. The tires we had, you couldn't get away with nothing like they're doing now. But very fast motorcycles, very reliable in the time, inexpensive. That bike cost new probably $1,200. And now you'd have a hard time rebuilding a motor for $1,200, you know.
Next race, 350 GP. Up front, it's Jay Richardson on that AJS. Eric Green 2nd, Tim Ming 3rd. But making his way through traffic, it's Joe Lockney on that 66 Yamaha as he gets by Craig Brecken, who's on that 69 AHRMA Harley-Davidson 350. Craig Brecken won the championship on that AHRMA, but Joe Lockney on that TD1C, showing that this two-stroke Yamaha has still got the stuff. In the 350 class, GP, he heads down the back straightaway, letting that two-stroke sing. In the final race of the AHRMA Vintage National is Formula Vintage, a rematch, as we see Gary Nixon chasing down his protege, that's Gary Fisher, both on 750 Honda, single cam, in line. Gary Nixon gets a better drive out of International Horseshoe into the kink. Gary gets a better drive. Gary Fisher runs off the track, but stays on the bike. Holds on. That's it. Gary Nixon is in second place. Super Dave Rosno is in the lead. Coming through now, battle for fourth. Dave Roper, Ken Nemoto, Tom Miller, Ken Nemoto from Tokyo, and yet 71, Moto Guzzi. He's on the charge as he heads towards the banking. All the way from Tokyo, Japan, to race at Daytona. This publisher of magazines in Japan. Motorcycle, skateboard, surfing. But in the end, Dave Rosno picked up the win. Nixon was second. Music for the show by Engine, Mike Preetz, Intrigue and Travesty, and all this music recorded at Fireside Studios, Westchester, Illinois, as Ken Nemoto waves to the crowd. He had a great trip as he finished fifth in Formula Vintage.
I always had a great time racing vintage bikes and hanging out with guys racing vintage motorcycles. More information on American Historic Racing Motorcycles Association. Their website is AHRMA.org. AHRMA.org, America's Vintage Racing Organization. Contact me, and I love to hear from my audience. It's teamdan45@gmail.com. Remember, you can always search on YouTube with Dan Schmitt Motorcycle Racing for great motorcycle racing action. And I highly encourage you to visit the World of Motorcycle Museum off Indiana 39. They're in Winamac, Indiana, 4 miles south of North Judson, Indiana. Give them a call first at 574-896-3172. It's a great trip and a great collection of motorcycles.